Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name is Tonya, and today's video is for all my friends out there who love spooky season, fall, cozy vibes. I have 10 amazing Gothic fantasy recommendations for you that are going to be perfect for all of your spooky season reading. So go ahead, grab yourself a tasty beverage, sit back, get cozy, and let's talk about some books. So first up, we have A Sorcerer's Come to Call by T. Kingfisher, and this particular book of T. Kingfisher's. So first up, we have A Sorcerer's Come to Call by T. Kingfisher, and this is a dark reimagining of The Goose Girl, which is a Brothers Grimm fairy tale, and it's one that T. Kingfisher, her writing really just shines in. It has secrets, it has murder, it has forbidden magic, and just some overall creepy, gothic, atmospheric kind of feels to it. So in this book, we're following a young woman named Cordelia, and she is always known that her mother is a little unusual, but she didn't ever really realize how unusual she was until her mother unexpectedly ends up moving them in with a wealthy old squire. And as I said, Cordelia knew that her mother was a little bit different than other mothers out there. Probably most mothers don't make their daughters sit in silence unmoving for hours at a time. And, you know, there's just some things that didn't quite add up. And then once they move in with this older squire, Cordelia really comes to care for him and the other people living at this manor. And she also comes to find out that her mother is a dark sorceress. So she wants to do whatever she can to keep the people who have now become like family to her safe. And as I said, this takes place in an old manor, so it definitely also has those creepy house vibes for it. So definitely has all the spooky season vibes with a little touch of some dark humor thrown in. And as you can see, it's not very long, so also a pretty quick read. So great one to put on your TBR for this fall. So then next up, we're going to talk about Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. And this one takes place in New Orleans, so it has all those kind of dark vibes that you associate with New Orleans, with, you know, all of their above ground cemeteries and the voodoo magic that takes place and the kind of history of vampires and ghosts. So just its location alone has all the spooky season vibes. And then the story itself just adds more to those vibes. So in Phantasma, we're following a young woman named Ophelia. And Ophelia is a necromancer. She just recently came into her powers after her mother passed away. And Ophelia and her sister and her mother had been living in this grand kind of manor house in New Orleans that, you know, kind of has started to break down. Repairs are definitely needed, but it's the only home they've ever known. And come to find out, her mother had a lot of debt with the house, and if they can't find a way to pay it, they're going to get kicked out of the only home they've ever known. So in order to try to help take care of the debt, Ophelia's sister enters into a contest called Phantasma. And Phantasma is this contest that takes place every so many years in an old manor house in New Orleans, and it's run by a devil. And once you get in, you can't get out until the game is over or until you die. So Ophelia ends up going into Phantasm as well because she wants to find her sister, make sure she's safe, and then get them both out of there. But once you're in, as I said, you can't get out. So then Ophelia also has to take part in the trials. And the trials in this book, they're really unique and they are on the darker side. So they go perfectly with the theme of this book. And to top it all off, while she's in there, Ophelia forms a relationship with a ghost. And what could be more perfect for spooky season than falling in love with a ghost? So if you haven't read Phantasma yet, I would definitely add it to your TBR for this fall. And there is another book in the series. It's called Enchantra. It would also be a good one for spooky season if you end up enjoying Phantasma. They are interconnected standalones, so you don't have to read one to read the other, but I would suggest reading them in order, because if you would happen to read Enchantra first, then you will get some spoilers for Phantasma. Then for our next book, all you really need to know is it's about toxic lesbian vampires, and that is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. So Bury Our Bones is set in 3 different timelines, and we're following 3 different female main characters. And the main one we're following for the majority of the book is Maria, and we do follow her from her life before she was turned, and then continue to follow her as she learns to live with being a vampire. And her story takes place in like 1532, so it definitely has, you know, that old world feel to it that you kind of associate with vampires, more like a historical fiction feel to the writing. And then our second character we're following's name is Charlotte, and she comes into the picture in 1827, so still getting all those old world feels. Plus, you know, we start to see Charlotte develop a relationship with Maria and all that comes along with that. And then our final timeline we're following is a modern day one starting in 2019. And we're following a young woman named Alice who has just started at college in the States. And while this book does give you all those dark Gothic vibes just based on the fact of where the majority of the story is taking place, who the characters are, and also the fact that we're telling a story about vampires, this book really is more character driven. It's a book about hunger, love, rage, life. So deals with a lot of different things, all stemming back to these women who have been turned into vampires and how they, you know, start to lose their humanity over time. So definitely a good read. And if you haven't read any of V.E. Schwab's writing before, it definitely has an ethereal quality to it and will be perfect for the fall season. And once again, toxic lesbian vampires. Then my next recommendation is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. And Rachel Gillig is like the queen of writing dark, Gothic, atmospheric stories. And besides this series, she has another one we're going to talk about in a little bit. She just can write a dark Gothic atmosphere like nobody's business. And in this particular book, we're following a diviner named Six, and we start off in an old cathedral as our setting, and there's 6 different diviners that live at this particular cathedral. And in order for them to tell you your future, they essentially have to be drowned to get their images to be able to predict kind of the god's fate for you. So something ends up happening to Six's sister diviners, and she ends up leaving this cathedral and going out into the world to try to save them. There is also an amazing gargoyle companion in this book named Bartholomew. You will absolutely love Bartholomew, and him being a gargoyle definitely adds to the Gothic feel of the book. He is very warm and loving in nature, so you're absolutely going to fall in love with him. The second book in this series comes out in September, so you could read both of them this fall. It is a duology, so that would finish off your series, but I absolutely love Rachel Gillig's writing, and I know you're going to love it too. Then my next recommendation is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed, and this one is a YA fantasy, and our female main character, Effie, has a favorite fantasy book that she has used to kind of help her cope with different things going on with her life. It is about a dark fairy king, and this fairy king has essentially, even though it's kind of bringing her comfort through the story, he's kind of been haunting her throughout her entire life. Well, while she's away at school, there comes up where there's a contest where the author's son is looking to redo the estate of his late father. So they're having a competition between the different architecture students there to come up with the best plan, and then whoever wins gets to be the one that builds this new house that will be the author's family's new family home. So Effie does end up winning this contest, so she gets to travel to High Rafe Manor and, begin work on this project. And her rival at school also ends up going to the manor at the same time that Effie does. And when they get there, this place is not what it seems. The house is really run down. It's kind of creepy. Things are happening that no one can really explain. And it's definitely on the haunted side and has some secrets hidden in it. So definitely worth the read this spooky season. Then next up we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace, and this is one of my favorite series. I love Adeline Grace's writing, and she does Gothic really well. We are following a young woman in this book named Signa, and she's essentially been followed by death her entire life. Her parents were killed when she was a baby, and she's kind of been passed off from relative to relative for her entire life. And every time she ends up with a new guardian, then they mysteriously die. So she's definitely not had your normal childhood or a very happy life. And she's kind of turned to experimenting with poisons to get her through some of the hard things that have come up in her life. So when Signa's current guardian ends up passing away, she finds out that death is not only following her, but she can actually see and talk to him as well. And she ends up going and living with the final relative that she has. And when she gets to this last relative's house, she comes to find out that someone is trying to kill off her cousin Blythe. And Signa is not going to let that happen. She doesn't want to have to move again. Plus, she starts to come to care for these relatives that she's now living with. And Signa decides her best option to find out what's happening with her cousin is to work with death and figure out who's trying to kill her. So not only does it have those dark Gothic vibes, but we have death and kind of a murder mystery feel. So really fun series. And definitely, if you haven't read it, put it on your TBR for this fall. Then next we have Asperfell by Jamie Thomas. And this one 100% has those dark Gothic vibes. So in this book, we're following a young woman named Bryony, and she ends up being accused of having magic. And in this particular realm, since the old king has died, magic has been outlawed. So when you get found to have magic, you are either forced into the new king's service, you're sent off to this prison of mages, or you are executed. And Bryony ends up getting sent off to the prison for mages. It's called Asperfell. And this prison holds all the rogue mages. It holds violent criminals and a bunch of demented spirits. And anyone who's been sent to Asperfell has never made it back. So the setting alone for this one's going to give all those dark, creepy vibes that we're looking for this time of year. And on top of that, has a really good story, really unique magic system, and it's just a fun little read. So would be a great one to pick up this spooky season. All right, and then we have One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I told you we would be visiting one of her other series. And this is the first book in the Shepherd King duology. And this was one of my favorite reads from last year. As soon as I finished the first book, I had to immediately pick up the second book because I had to know what happened. And this ended on such a big cliffhanger. In this book, we're following a young woman named Elspeth. And in the land she lives in, the forest has become tainted. And if you go into the forest at night, you can get this kind of illness. And this illness gives you magic, but it's really unpredictable, the kind of magic you get, and there's always a cost to the magic. And if you end up getting magic through this fever, then you are imprisoned, sent away, or executed, because it's just so unpredictable what happens with this fever. And the only way you're allowed to have magic in this realm are through the Providence cards, which are kind of like tarot cards, but each card holds a different kind of magic in it. So if you have magic through one of these cards, then that's fine. But if you've gotten magic through this fever, then you're going to run into some trouble. And Elspeth does end up catching this fever. And for her, the way the magic comes out is she then has a monster in her head. And she's had to live with this monster for years now. It was hidden that she had this fever, so no one outside of her family knows that she had it. And they've kind of kept her in isolation and away from other people, so no one finds out about it. And because her magic is this monster in her head, no one really knows that she has magic. She's the only one that can hear this monster, and he doesn't really do much as far as influencing her to do things most of the time, so she's been able to keep it a secret. And things happen in the story where Elspeth ends up going on a quest to try to find all of these Providence cards so that she can help save anyone who had the fever like she did. There's a way that if you get all of the cards, the magic of the forest can be broken, and everyone who's contracted this fever can be saved. So definitely has all those dark Gothic elements. We got a spooky forest. We got a interesting magic system. We have a quest. We have a monster in Elspeth's head who is questionable in his morality. And like I said, Rachel Gillig does such a good job just writing in a moody, atmospheric way that you're going to gobble this one up and immediately move on to the next book. Then next up, we have Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. And this one, I'm not going to lie, was almost a little too creepy for me. I am a little bit of a baby when it comes to scary things, and this one was right on that borderline of being too scary for me. But that being said, it was such a good book and perfect for this time of year. But I do want to warn you before you pick it up, it is a little creepy, and you'll also want to check the trigger warnings for this one. So in this book, we're following a young woman named Adeline, and she is a flourishing author, and her grandmother ends up passing away, and she inherits her late grandmother's Gothic mansion. So she figures this is going to be a great fresh start to her. She's going to move into the mansion, do her writing, and everything's going to be great. But she gets there and there's angry souls haunting the hallways. There's mysterious break-ins. There's random roses being left for her in the house, and she has no idea where they've come from. Plus, there's eerie, threatening messages appearing, but they seem to be more like promises than threats. So, as you can see, it is definitely a little bit darker, a little bit more creepy. There is a stalker kind of relationship that happens during the book. So, as I said, you'll definitely want to check the trigger warnings. But once you start reading this book, you cannot put it down. You get caught up in the story and so immersed in what's happening and just the different mysteries that are going on that you're going to absolutely devour this book. Just be prepared for the fact it is a little darker and more creepy than the other books that I've recommended. Then finally, I have The Foxglove King by Hannah Winton, and this is one of my new favorite romantasy series. Hannah Winton is also another author who's just really good at those kind of moody, gothic, dark vibes. And in this book, there is life magic and there is death magic, which also adds to that kind of dark feel. People in this realm also use poison for trying to treat different ailments as well as for pleasure. So that also adds to those vibes. And in this book, we're following a young woman whose name is Lore, and she has death magic, and she has had it since she was born, which is not typical for how people usually develop this magic. Everyone else who has magic over death, they've gotten it from a near-death experience. Lore is the only one out there who has just kind of had it since birth. She doesn't know why. She used to live under the city with her mother, with this kind of cult of priestesses who worship the death goddess. And there came a point where her mother threw her out on the streets in order to save her. She was going to have to go through some sort of ritual that people usually didn't come back from. So in order to keep her alive, her mother threw her out on the streets, and she's been surviving ever since. And as she's been living her life on the streets, she ends up getting taken in by some poison runners, and she was raised by them and has been working for them ever since. Well, something goes down and she ends up catching the attention of the guards because they find out that she does indeed have this death magic, and she gets taken into custody. The king decides that he's going to use her for this magic, and then things kind of progress from there. This book does have one of the best love triangles that I've ever read in it, and just overall is a really good romantasy that has an interesting plot, lots of political intrigue and forbidden love. And as I said, has become one of my favorite new series and would be absolutely perfect to read during spooky season. So those are the 10 Gothic fantasy books that I think you should definitely add to your TBR for this fall. Let me know down in the comments which one of these books you want to pick up first, or if you have any other Gothic fantasy recommendations that I didn't mention that you want to share, leave that down in the comments below. Also, thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me. I hope this video gave you some good reads to put on your fall TBR. Take care, keep reading, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.